Thea glanced at the puzzled and asked, I don't know you all. Why would you help me? Please explain it to them, or else the people will spread rumors about me again. She was really worried. Rumors about her would spread like wildfire if word of today's incident spread. They might even say that she had slept with all three of them. The three of them were stunned by her words. Explain. How are we supposed to explain? How are we supposed to explain that you have a very capable husband? The three of them did not dare to say a word. James had been in Kensington for a while but refused to reveal his identity. They would be digging their own grave if they were to expose him. The hall fell silent for a moment. All the guests present had their eyes on them. Everyone was curious about why these three prominent figures were respectful toward Thea. James stood aside and glanced at them with a smile. The expression looked like he was threatening them, saying, "You guys can wait to face my wrath if you dare to reveal my identity." The three of them were frightened to see James' expression. Una began to think hard. Ads by Pub Future. She knew that there had to be an explanation for the situation today. Otherwise, the rumors outside would spread out of hand. Actually, it isn't a big deal. Do you remember the person you saved 10 years ago? Una broke the silence. Yeah, Thea nodded. You told me the person I saved from the Cadence Villa turned out to be the ghost masked man that was shot by the Blythe King some time ago. That's right. They're helping you because of him. They owe him a favor. Although he did not come to see you in person, he was secretly helping you from the shadows. With this, he has repaid you for your life-saving grace 10 years ago. He said that he doesn't owe you anything from now on. But, wasn't he shot by the Blythe King? Thea was suspicious. Although he was strong, he was inferior to the Blythe King. He remembered you all his life and said that he owed you his life. Therefore, he requested that Alex and the others take care of you, and now he has completely repaid you for saving his life. Seeing how James remained silent, Brian understood that meant he consented to what Una had suggested. Immediately, he stood up and admitted, "That's right, Thea. It's why we were helping you. I've already helped him to repay you. He said he owed his life to you but did not have the chance to make it up to you. He would have personally repaid you if it wasn't for the Blythe King's succession. However, he no longer has the chance to do so as the Blythe King killed him." Alex nodded and played along. They agreed with one another. Everyone immediately understood after hearing their conversation. Ads by Pub Future. They treated Thea with so much respect because of the person she saved 10 years ago. The person that was taken out by the Blythe King was the one Thea had rescued 10 years ago. These prominent figures owed the ghost masked man a favor, which was why they helped Thea. Now that the favor had been repaid, these prominent figures would no longer stand up for her in the future. So that's what happened. Lex, sitting on the sofa, trembled as he watched them. He thought Thea had earned herself such influence, and the Callahans were about to rise to prominence. These people were simply paying back a favor. After repaying the favor, they would no longer have anything to do with Thea. Meanwhile, James glanced at Una. He was now aware that Una had found out his identity and even knew that he was the one who killed the heads of the Great Four. Lawson. He smiled and glanced at Una. Una turned to meet the smile on James' face. For some reason, she felt goosebumps rise all over her skin, and her whole body froze. She replied with an awkward smile, James. "Thank you," said James. Although Una discovered his identity, she helped resolve the situation so that Thea could easily accept it, and it gave everyone an explanation. Otherwise, his identity might have been exposed. He and Thea might have been over if she had discovered his identity. His hands were covered in blood. It was impossible for Thea to accept someone like him. It really is him. Thea had already predicted such an outcome. However, she was slightly disappointed because the person she had saved from the Cadence Villa and the ghost masked man who saved her was executed by the Blythe King. Unfortunately, she would never find out the identity of this person, nor would she have the chance ever to see the person who had been secretly helping her. The news disheartened her. At that moment, another big shot arrived. The person was Charles, the executive chairman of Abundant Group. He immediately spotted the crowd after entering the hall. Seeing James, he felt his soul leave his body. His leg went rubbery and almost gave out. He rushed over and greeted them, saying, "Mr. Caden, Ems, Tia, Dad, these people made me kneel. Luke's confidence immediately returned when he saw Charles and he complained. Under the previous pressure, he had no choice but to kneel, but now his father had arrived. Although his family was not one of the great four, they were much stronger. It was only because the Bertrands did not care for such superficial titles. The Bertrands were only second to the Celestial Group. The Bertrands' existence was also one of the most well-known enterprises in Kensington. Ads by Pub Future. What? Charles glanced at where Luke pointed his finger and saw Alex, Brian, and Jay. What happened? He asked. This disrespectful kid couldn't control his mouth and insulted Tia, said Alex. What? Charles was furious when he heard the explanation. Luke thought Charles was angry to learn that he was forced to kneel to them. He arrogantly grumbled, Dad, I only said a few words, but they made me kneel and slap myself. You have to avenge me. You incompetent. Charles swung his hand at Luke. He slapped Luke with full force. Luke immediately fell to the ground. Charles walked to him and continued to beat him. Dad, stop. Stop it. Luke begged for mercy. Ads by Pub Future. After beating Luke for a while, Charles walked up to Tia, knelt down, and pleaded, Tia, I'm begging you to please forgive my incompetent son. Tia immediately recognized his actions were due to the ghost masked man. The ghost masked man is already dead, so why are these people still so afraid of him? Tia was confused. Immediately, she supported Charles and helped him up. Mr. Bertrand, you are overreacting. It's nothing serious. You should get up first. However, Charles was reluctant to stand up. He had personally witnessed James in action and how he easily killed the heads of the Great Four. There was also Rowena, who was tortured. He was overwhelmed with fear as he recalled the scene. My wife is asking you to get up, so just get up. Why you're being so stubborn? James said with dissatisfaction. James pretended that he was about to kick Charles. Charles hurriedly stood up in fear. I apologize for the unpleasant events that happened, everyone. Since the matter has been resolved, we shouldn't continue such a tense atmosphere on my 25th birthday. Let's enjoy the night and have fun. It's such a rare occasion for so many prominent figures to be gathered together, so why don't we get to know one another for greater business opportunities? Together, we will build a magnificent capital of medicine that will shock the whole world. The whole situation was under control after Yuna's speech. After the incident, Tia became the center of everyone's flattery. They no longer mocked Tia and felt she made the right choice to save the sole survivor 10 years ago. She earned the respect of so many big shots just by saving one person. Just who was this person? Since he's already been shot, why are these people still showing so much respect to Tia? After several prominent figures were helping Tia, everyone did not dare to bother her anymore. This left everyone puzzled, and they began to make guesses. Could it be that these big shots really owed the ghost masked man a favor? Now that they've repaid the favor, will they stop intervening in Tia's problems? Yeah, that's definitely the case. Many people began to speculate secretly. After they came to a conclusion, they no longer went to curry favor with Tia. Instead, they surrounded influential figures to try and win their favor. Corner sofa. Tia was in a daze. James sat beside her and deliberately asked with a gloomy expression, Tia, be honest with me. What's going on? Huh? Tia came to her senses and turned to James, who wore an angry expression. She immediately apologized. I'm sorry, honey. I'm also a little confused about the whole situation. What? James glanced at her. Remember how I was covered in scars? It was because I rushed into a fire to save someone 10 years ago. This person suddenly returned, and ads by Pub Future. Tia scanned their surroundings, and after confirming no one was around, she whispered, apparently, he is the ghost masked man who killed the heads of the Great Four and Trent. However, he was shot by the Blight King in the end. What? Why you are acquainted with a killer? James pretended to be surprised. I don't know him. I really have no clue about his identity, and he never showed himself to me. He must have approached a few influential people in Kensington who probably owed him favors before he died to help me if I was in trouble, Tia explained. Dee darling, you have to trust me. I never betrayed you. I swear. Tia glanced at James with tears in her eyes. I believe you. James reached out and covered her mouth. Thea frowned. You reek of smoke. Oh, I'm sorry. James promptly retracted his hands awkwardly. You should quit smoking, darling. Thea glanced at him pleadingly. She really hated the smell of smoke. She would always smell the pungent cigarette scent on him when walking beside him. It had been on her mind for a long time, but she never found the chance to tell him. Okay. James nodded his head firmly and suggested, I'll quit, I promise. How about I have one more, and I'll quit after this? Thea smiled. All right. You're granted permission. Her eyes were still teary, but she looked extremely mesmerizing with a smile. James was addicted just by looking at her. Ads by Pub Future. You are going to be doing big business in the future. There are many people here today, and since you've got a good relationship with Una, you should use the chance to get acquainted with people and lay the foundation for your future career, James encouraged her. Okay. Thea got up and walked toward Una. Una was together with some business bigwigs. Una. Hearing Thea's voice, Una immediately stood up and pulled her to sit together. Then, she continued the conversation. The trade center is officially open for investments. I plan to move my company headquarters there and open a longevity pharmaceuticals branch. Lawson, since you've got a wide range of connections, do you possibly know who paid a huge sum to purchase the trade center? Una frowned and said, I heard it's someone called Scarlett Brooks. I haven't been able to learn more about this person's background. Scarlett, it's a woman. Yes. Thea sat aside and listened to their conversation but could not understand anything. What do you mean by the trade cent? Asked Thea. Have you heard of the commercial city built in the city? Una replied. Thea nodded. Yeah, just yesterday, someone bought the trade center. I heard it cost trillions of dollars, Una explained. What? Thea was shocked by the information. In fact, Scarlett did not spend that much to buy the trade center. The trade center took 5 years to be completed, and a total investment of $500 billion was spent on the construction. The price of the center would surely be higher than the invested amount. Thus, even Una thought it could not possibly be bought without at least $1 trillion. Thea was completely shocked by the numbers. She was just an ordinary citizen and had never been exposed to upper-class society. Never in her life had she seen that much money. $1 trillion was an astronomical figure to her. What were $1 trillion in cash? It was not non-liquid assets. Take the Callahans as an example. Although they had assets worth more than $1 billion, it was the value of the company. It was the total of all the family businesses added up together. In terms of cash, it was considered adequate if a family like the Callahans had $100 million. As for the Celestial Group, their market value was hundreds of billions. This value was their non-liquid assets. Once the Celestial Group encountered a problem such as insufficient capital and lost its ability to operate normally, it would lead to a decline in market value. In an instant, these hundreds of billions would decrease to tens of billions or even a few billion. In the worst case, they would be completely useless, and the corporation would be in serious debt. The group of business bigwigs gathered together and discussed the matter of entering the commercial center. Ads by Pub Future. Thea was not familiar with these things. She listened attentively and took it as a chance to learn. Meanwhile, James sat alone in the lounge. He was dressed very casually, and since he was merely a live-in son-in-law, no one bothered to greet him. He was happy to be left alone. After having lunch at the Kensington Hotel, James was slightly bored. Meanwhile, Thea kept following Una and constantly asked business-related questions. James had nothing to do. Coincidentally, Henry called and reported that he had some information about Dawson and Nine Fingers. Thea, it's a little boring here, so I'll head for a walk, he notified her. All right, Thea nodded. Don't worry, I'll bring Thea back safely tonight. I promise she won't even lose a strand of hair, Una said with a smile. James felt more relieved with Una around. Ads by Pub Future. He left the Kensington Hotel, hopped on his electric motorcycle, and headed to Common Clinic. Soon, he arrived at the clinic. Common Clinic was where Henry usually hung around. Although it was a clinic, it was usually not open for business. The entrance was half closed. James pushed open the door and walked inside. Henry and Scarlett were in the middle of a conversation when James suddenly walked over. The two immediately stood up. Henry picked up a cigarette from the table and handed it to James. He suddenly remembered that Thea had requested him to quit smoking. He wanted to refuse but instinctively took the cigarette handed to him. What did you find? James sat down and took a puff of the cigarette. The smoke filled his throat, and the feeling was simply ecstasy. Dawson's full name is Peter Dawson. He came to Kensington in the 80s when this place was still very chaotic. He climbed his way to the top from a small-time gangster and eventually became one of the strongest underworld forces. He maintains a very low profile because of the suppression by the authorities. However, he is still very influential in the underworld scene and has a security company with more than 10,000 security guards. Among them, 3,000 fought alongside him to build their empire. Henry took a deep breath and continued. Although he hasn't caused any trouble recently, he still operates some illegal businesses such as casinos and loan sharks. He is slowly shifting aboard because the domestic pressure on the criminal world is very tight. This person has had his hands in a lot of things and a lot of blood on his hands. He also possesses tens of billions of assets. However, he is much more low profile than Xander. James listened attentively, and his face darkened. Peter was already a dead man to James. What about Nine Fingers? He asked calmly. He is also from the same era as Peter. He rose to the top around the 80s too. However, this person is much more ruthless than Peter. His real name is Greg Martin, said Henry. When he was still a nobody in his earlier years, he offended someone, and one of his fingers was cut off. Therefore, he went by the nickname Nine Fingers when he reached the peak. Basically, he wanted people to know that he was the new Sky of the underworld scene. He has plenty of businesses, but the primary one is loan sharking. Henry reported all the information he had inquired about honestly. Additionally, the Great Four have united and contacted Peter and Greg. James' face darkened after hearing the news. It will be the 10th death anniversary of my grandfather, my father, and the entire Cadence in 8 days. Since no one carried out my request, just kill them all to pay respects to the deceased Cadence. James' expression was furious, and his whole body exuded a terrifyingly cold aura. Scarlett was intimidated by his intense aura. It was like a big stone pressing on her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. Ads by Pub Future. What should I do next, James? Henry was already used to James' intimidating temperament. He knew that plenty of people from the Great Four would die this time. James waved his hands and instructed, "We wait until the death anniversary of my grandfather to take action. Also, spread the message and say that those who participated in the demise of the Cadence should gather at the Cadence Cemetery to settle this matter once and for all." All right, I'll notify some people from the underworld to spread the news. Henry nodded and walked out. He pulled the phone and made a call. Meanwhile, Scarlett, who sat opposite James, raised her head and looked at him. James, I've already bought the commercial city. What should I do next? Asked Scarlett. Do you need me to teach you how to build a financial center? Scarlett's heart skipped a beat. I'm a grave robber. How would I know this kind of stuff? She bit down her lips and was unsure of what to say next. James seemingly understood what was on her mind and said indifferently, "You're the boss behind the scenes and won't need to handle things in person. Why don't you just hire someone if you don't know what to do? There isn't a shortage of talents these days." Ads by Pub Future. Scarlett never expected James to predict what she was thinking. "Okay, I'll follow up as soon as possible," she immediately nodded and said. James did not leave and stayed in Common Clinic for the whole afternoon. At the same time, a new rumor began to spread in Kensington. Have you heard? Word is that the Cadence Villa was deliberately set on fire by someone. I heard that the Great Four were the ones that led the scheme. Additionally, many prominent figures were involved. That includes Dawson, Nine Fingers, and Xander. There's a message that's being widely spread asking those who participated in the scheme against the Cadence 10 years ago to gather at the Cadence Cemetery 8 days later to settle it once and for all. That will fall on the 15th of August. Warren and Trent Xavier were murdered. The other 3 heads of the Great Four were also murdered. It's rumored that the person who escaped the fire in the Cadence Villa 10 years ago has returned to take revenge on them. Who is this person? Didn't the Blight King already execute him? Who knows? Maybe someone is deliberately spreading fake news, or maybe it wasn't just one person seeking revenge but a team. Only one got shot, and there might be more in hiding. Henry spread the rumor, and it caused an uproar in Kensington. The news had also reached the Great Four. At the same time, Dawson and Nine Fingers also heard the message. Kensington outskirts, Villa. Many people were gathered. Not only were the Great Four's current heads present, but many people from the underworld also showed up. The new heads of the Great Four and many underground figures were gathered in the villas. The head of the Xaviers, Hector. The current head of the Frasers, Melvin. The current head of the Wilsons, Calvin. The current head of the Zimmermans, Drake. These four people were considered the most influential figures in Kensington. Apart from those from the capital, they were the real bigwigs of Kensington. However, at this moment, they all wore very serious expressions. In addition to these four, there were many other people present. One of them was in his 50s, slightly chubby, and wore a white vest with a gold necklace. A parrot sat on his shoulders as he played with a luminous white pearl. "What should we do now, Dawson?" Hector glanced at the middle-aged man who was playing with a pearl. The man was none other than Peter Dawson, who went by Dawson. Peter glanced at the ferocious-looking man beside him, who had a long scar on his face and was missing one finger. "What do you think, Greg?" asked Peter. Ads by Pub Future. The other man was Greg, who went by his nickname Nine Fingers. Greg said disdainfully, "What is there to be afraid of? You guys don't seem to understand the seriousness of this matter. My brother was killed. Now, the Xaviers has been completely banned from leaving Kensington," said Hector. "Is Rowena still refusing to name this person?" Melvin glanced at him and asked. "The Blight King supposedly took care of the ghost masked man. Why is there still such news being spread around? Does the ghost masked man have accomplices?" Calvin frowned. "I can't wait to see how capable this person is. Don't worry, guys. I've already made arrangements to bring 5,000 of my men to the Cadence Cemetery in 8 days. We'll go together and see what he can do to us," Greg said furiously. Peter nodded. "Yes, I agree. I've got a lot of men. We'll head there together when the time comes." There were plenty of people from the underworld gathered. They were paid and employed by the Great Four. "Dawson, Nine Fingers, we will firmly stand by your side. I can dispatch 100 well-trained men. I'll bring a dozen men too. Count me in. I'll bring 300 men." These underworld bosses shouted their willingness to stand together one after another. The three heads of the Great Four were immediately relieved. Only Hector was still worried. Ads by Pub Future. He had never seen Rowena so scared before and sensed that something bad was about to happen. However, he had no other choice. It was too much to ask for him to lead his family members to the Cadence Cemetery to kneel and kill themselves. He simply could not do it. He was left with no choice but to fight to the death. HMPH, the sole survivor of the Cadence. "We will head to the Cadence Cemetery in 8 days. And as long as he shows up, we will bury him together with his family," Calvin said with an indifferent expression. "I'm relieved to have you all here. You can rest assured that I will keep my word. Once we overcome this obstacle, the Zimmermans will give 30% of our shares as a reward to everyone," said Drake. "The Wilsons will also give 30% of our shares to reward everyone. We shall get through this together. I can't wait to see what this Cadence survivor is capable of doing." Melvin nodded in agreement. "Haha." Laughter echoed throughout the villa. These people seemed to have pictured the fate of the Cadence survivor. Henry reported the discovery of the Great Four's gathering. The Great Four's secret gathering was unable to stay hidden from Henry. Common Clinic. Henry explained everything that the Great Four had discussed during their gathering. James' face sank after hearing the report. Bang! He slammed his hands on the table. The wooden table was shattered into pieces. Scarlett, who was beside him, trembled in fear and almost fell off her chair. "James, the Great Four, Dawson, and Nine Fingers have a death wish. According to the results of their discussion, there will be more people than expected gathering at the Cadence Cemetery. The combined forces of all parties will add up to at least 10,000 people. Should we deal with them in advance?" James' face was filled with rage. "You guys want to play? Fine, I'll play with you guys and make sure you have a fun game. Ask the Blight King to come and see me at Common Clinic," James ordered furiously. Henry glanced at James. He wanted to say that the Blight King was not James' subordinate. However, he swallowed the words and simply walked aside. He took out his phone and called the Blight King. Blight King, yes, it's me again. James has requested you come to Common Clinic to see him. The Blight King had just arrived home from the military region. Yet before he could have a seat, he received a call from Henry. He furiously swung his leg and shattered the villa door. Tell James the first don't work for him. He doesn't have the authority to order me around. Henry heard the Blight King growl and smash his door. Then, he turned around and glanced at James sitting behind him. I advise you to come as soon as possible, Blight King. James is on the verge of going on a rampage right now. Kensington will turn into a battlefield like at the border of the Southern Plains if his anger is not extinguished immediately. The consequences are going to be severe. Are you sure you'll be able to fix it by then? FCK. The Blight King was furious. He was highly dissatisfied with James. Ads by Pub Future. However, he did not dare not to go. He understood James' temper very well. He made a name for himself in the battle about a year ago. The Blight King was afraid of not going. He smashed his phone furiously, turned around, and immediately ordered, prepare the car. I need to go to Common Clinic. James, I think the Blight King is really mad, Henry reported cautiously after the phone call. James' expression also eased up, and he replied with a smile, anyone would be mad if they were him. We're of a similar rank, yet I'm ordering him around. It surely doesn't feel good. True. Henry sat down. He felt a little sympathetic toward the Blight King. The Blight King was one of the 5 commanders. However, ever since he was transferred to Kensington, he had constantly been cleaning up James' messes. Henry felt the urge to laugh after thinking about it. The Blight King arrived very quickly and showed up at Common Clinic within 30 minutes. He walked inside with a furious expression. Henry immediately got up and gave up his seat. Then, he picked up a cigarette on the table and handed it to Blight King with a smile. Blight King, our commander requested to see you not for anything important. He simply wanted to chat with you. Why do you have to show such an angry face? Ads by Pub Future. The Blight King refused to take the cigarette and sat down quietly. He looked at James sitting with his legs crossed and asked, James, I mean, Black Dragon. What do you want? As the commander of the 5 armies, you've probably heard about the rumors being spread today. Of course, the Blight King had heard of the rumors. It was because he received a call from Henry after hearing about the rumors that made him furious. What exactly are you trying to do? The Blight King stood up abruptly and roared. Why you yelling? It isn't anything important. Sit down, and we'll talk. James glanced at him and said indifferently. The Blight King knew that it would not be something good if James wanted to see him. He took a deep breath and sat down. James lit a cigarette and took a puff, then said calmly, it's not a big deal. I just need 100,000 soldiers deployed 8 days later. Impossible. I'm warning you, James. This is Kensington, not the Southern Plains. Do you know what an uproar it'll cause if 100,000 soldiers are deployed? Henry, I'm here. Pass on a military order for me. I need 500,000 soldiers from the Southern Plains. Understood. Hearing him, the Blight King was terrified and immediately compromised. James, I am begging you. Stop torturing me. All right, you need 100,000 soldiers. Fine, I'll deploy them for you. However, you need to promise me that there can't be any deaths. I'll treat this as a drill for the military. Don't worry, not that many people will be killed. Probably, a dozen at most, James said with a smile. The Blight King sighed in relief. He had already investigated James' situation. Although James was short-tempered, he never hurt the innocent, only those who deserved it. The Blight King was willing to cover it up for him if the dozens of people that died deserved it. This is the last time. The Blight King stood up and left. After the Blight King left, James did not continue to hang around. He instructed Henry on some matters, then left the Common Clinic and returned to Thea's house. It was already 8 in the evening when he arrived home. Thea was home before him. Gladys immediately complained as soon as James returned home. Where did you go the whole day instead of cooking? I met a military comrade and spent some time catching up with him, James walked into the house and explained. Mom, he's my husband, not a maid. It isn't his responsibility to be cooking every day. Thea hurriedly stood up and protected James. He eats and lives in our home for free. Is he expecting me to cook and serve him instead? Gladys raised her voice. Ever since Thea dressed up and radiated charisma, Gladys was increasingly displeased every time she looked at James. She wanted Thea to divorce James. Ads by Pub Future. James did not refute anything. He simply walked over to the sofa and sat down. Why you sitting down? Wash the dishes and tidy up the kitchen, Gladys ordered. Immediately, James stood up and headed to the kitchen to clean the dishes. Mom. Thea's expression dimmed. Do you still take me as your mother? You should listen to me if you do. Gladys glared at Thea and scolded her. Thea remained silent. Meanwhile, Alyssa was applying ice to David's face while lying on the sofa. His face was bruised, and the swelling had not completely gone down. Mom. Thea has to divorce James. I heard that many influential people knelt to Thea today at Yuna's birthday party. TSK, TSK. The scene of dozens of people kneeling to her spread like crazy in my friend circle. It must have been shocking. Yeah, Thea is gorgeous. Even though James was a soldier and knows some medical skills, so what? We're in Kensington, the capital of medicine. There are plenty of people who practice medicine. Not everyone can become like Dr. Fallon. Alyssa agreed. The two expressed similar opinions. Thea rolled her eyes at them. You two talk too much. Thea, Brian isn't a bad choice. He's young and rich. On top of that, he's handsome. He is so much better than that trash, James, right? David stood up and tried to persuade her. Thea did not want to waste time talking nonsense with her family. Ads by Pub Future. She got up and went to the kitchen to help James. She felt terrible that James had been ordered around ever since marrying her. She walked into the kitchen and glanced at James wearing an apron while washing the dishes. With an apologetic expression, she said, I'm sorry, darling. You go rest. I'll do. That won't do, honey. How can I let my precious wife do such chores? You go rest, and I'll do. I'm an ordinary human too. No can do. You go outside first. I'll do it. There's so much grease and smoke in the kitchen. James' hands were wet, so he did not push Thea with them. Instead, he used his body to push her outside. Thea had no choice but to leave. She went to the living room, but her family kept trying to persuade her. This made her very frustrated. Mom, did you forget who made you look good when you went to the military region? Did you forget who healed my scars? Didn't you already accept James? You even wanted to help him open up a clinic. Why you're suddenly changing your mind again? The past is the past. Now is now. In short, you have to divorce him. Thea was speechless and did not bother speaking with Gladys anymore. She got up and went back to her room. James finished cleaning the dishes and tidying up the kitchen. He walked out with a bright smile on his face. Mom, I've cleaned up everything. I'll return to the room first if there isn't anything else. Go. Gladys was dissatisfied. She was furious seeing James after seeing her daughter's beautiful face. James returned to the bedroom. Thea sat in front of her computer and designed clothes. James did not understand the designing process and did not want to disturb her. He went to get his mat and spread it out on the ground. He glanced at Thea, who was seriously designing, and a smile that even he did not notice formed on his face. The next day, David's car that got into the accident has been taken to the automobile center to be repaired and was already fixed. Today, he was going to pick up the car and finish some follow-up procedures, including registering insurance and so on. Gladys and the whole family were naturally going to follow him. Before leaving, Gladys asked, James, can you drive? James nodded. Yeah. Gladys threw him a car key and instructed him, saying, Zara will be coming back today. You take David's Hyundai to pick her up. James scratched his head. Who's Zara? Zara is my cousin. She just graduated from college and finished her practice in the field. She's planning to come back to further her career in Kensington, Thea explained. She took out a picture and handed it to James. This is Zara. I've already called her and sent her your photo. She'll be arriving around 11 in the morning. Don't forget. I'll send you her number later. What are you doing today? Asked James. Yuna said that she'll be signing a contract in the commercial city today and wants me to come along to look around. I want to follow her and learn some stuff, said Thea. Alright, James replied. Ads by Pub Future. He would be more relieved if it was Yuna. Yuna knew his identity. Thus, he would definitely be respectful and might try to curry favor with Thea. The family left. James did not head out in a hurry because it was still early. He washed up and lazily headed to the parking lot. Then, he got into David's car and headed to the airport. He arrived early at the airport and dozed off in the car. 1 hour later, a woman dressed in a casual white t-shirt and denim skirt walked out of the airport with her suitcase while sucking a lollipop. She was in her early 20s. She had an oval face, long black hair, a curvy figure, and a pair of slender legs. She walked out of the airport and glanced around. Then, she took out her phone and dialed a number. James was dozing off when his phone suddenly rang. He pulled out his phone and found it was the number Thea had sent him. Immediately, he knew that Zara had arrived and answered the phone. Zara, have you arrived? Yeah, where are you, James? I don't see you. I'm in the parking lot outside the airport. The car plate is CAN A88450. Ads by Pub Future. I'm at the airport entrance. Come over quickly. Zara hung up the phone. A BMW X5 stopped beside her as soon as she did. The man in the car rolled down his window and smiled at Zara, who was still standing on the side of the road. He waved his hands. Hey, beauty, are you on vacation in Kensington? Have you found a hotel yet? I have a presidential suite in a 5-star hotel. Get in the car, and I'll take you there. How does 10,000 once sound? Go away. Zara raised her eyebrows and scolded him. The face of the guy in the BMW sank. He was a regular at the airport and often met beautiful women from outside the city. He always took the initiative to seize his chances. Even conservative women were attracted by his BMW X5 presidential suite in a 5-star hotel, and $10,000. 30,000. He muttered another amount with a cold expression. He glanced at Zara from head to toe. This face and figure. TSK, TSK. He swallowed his saliva. Seeing Zara was not tempted, he muttered another amount, 100,000. He had a smug look on his face. 100,000 was definitely a tempting amount to ordinary people. The truth was that his car was rented, and the presidential suite was also fake. The moment a woman got in the car, she would be drugged and brought to a rented unit. After they had fun with her and took a few pictures, they would threaten the woman to make money for their boss. The man driving the BMW X5 was named Nelson Moore. His boss was pretty well known in the criminal world and owned a decent club in Kensington. His task was to drive the BMW X5 to find prey outside the bus stations, train stations, and airports. As soon as he found a pretty woman from out of town, he would approach and lure them. The moment they got in the car, they were captured. Nelson would immediately take out a drugged drink that he had prepared in advance as soon as the woman got in the car. Once the woman took a sip, she would feel drowsy and pass out. Then, they would sleep with the woman and take pictures to threaten her. Afterward, the woman would be sent to the club to earn money for their boss. Nelson looked at Zara. She was one of the most beautiful women he had come across and would likely earn them a lot of money in the club. Boss will surely reward me well if she earns him a lot of money. I have to get her. Nelson got out of the car. Ads by Pub Future. He had a decent appearance and was dressed in a white suit, Rolex watch, and gold necklace. However, these were all counterfeits, bought to deceive girls unfamiliar with luxury brands. Nelson approached Zara with a gentle smile and said, "It must be your first time in Kensington, beauty. Even if you're not interested in selling, I'm a local of Kensington and can be your tour guide." He patted his car as he spoke. "This is a top-notch BMW X5. My family doesn't have much money, but we have 5 suites in the urban area and a villa in the suburbs. I have a family business with more than $1 billion assets," Nelson bragged. This was his routine. It was tried and tested. Every woman he came across fell for it. "Do you not understand what I said? I asked you to go away." Zara was not tempted and simply scolded him while glaring at him. Nelson did not expect Zara to be so hard to convince. He had already said so much, yet she was not even slightly tempted. Suddenly, an idea popped into his mind. He took out a bottle of mineral water and handed it to her. "Beauty, would you like a drink?" At this very moment, another vehicle stopped near them, a $1 million Audi. A handsome man approached and greeted, Zara. Ads by Pub Future. Zara glanced at him and frowned. She said with dissatisfaction, why you here? Did my mom tell you? Auntie told me you'll be arriving in Kensington today and asked me to pick you up. Get in the car. I've already booked a table in the Gaumont. Let's grab something to eat first. Zara glanced around and saw that James had not arrived. She thought about it for a while and nodded. Who are you, brat? Nelson was infuriated. Before he could catch his prey, another person suddenly interrupted him. The man driving the Audi was Francis Leland. He was a classmate from Zara's college and had been pursuing Zara for years. Francis was very capable of pleasing his future mother-in-law and often brought gifts to Zara's mother. Thus, he easily found out that she was returning to Kensington and arrived on time to pick her up. Who are you? He raised his eyebrows when he saw Nelson. Listen to me, brat. My name is Nelson Moore. My boss is Frank Ziegler from the East District, nicknamed and known as Mad Dog in the underworld. Nelson puffed his chest and threatened. Francis' face immediately turned pale after hearing this. He hurriedly took out a cigarette and handed it over respectfully. You must be under Mad Dog. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Nelson took the cigarette very contemptuously. Most people in Kensington had to respect him as long as his boss' name was brought up. Francis personally lit the cigarette for Nelson. Initially, Zara had decided to leave with Francis. She had thought about dating him, seeing that he had been pursuing her all these years and that her mother liked him a lot since he constantly visited her house. Her mother repeatedly reminded her about how big the Lellens family business was in Kensington and how Francis was really promising. Yet never did she expect him to be so disappointing. This woman is mine. Get lost. Nelson smoked the cigarette and scolded him. What? Francis hesitated. He had been pursuing Zara for many years, and his chance had finally come. However, Mad Dog was not someone he could offend. He was a gangster in the criminal world and had hundreds of men under him. The Lelands would be in trouble if he offended Mad Dog. Hurry and get lost. Nelson pushed him away with his leg. Why yes, I'll go right now. After contemplating the pros and cons, Francis compromised. There was no reason to offend Mad Dog just for a woman. The Lelands would be in big trouble if Mad Dog targeted them. He turned around to leave. Zara. Suddenly a voice sounded. James stopped the car and compared the woman in the photo with the one standing by the road. After confirming it was the right person, he hurriedly walked over and greeted her, saying, Zara, it's James. You are the James that married into the Callahans. Zara glanced at James. Ads by Pub Future. She had heard rumors before returning to Kensington. The Callahans found a husband for her cousin, Thea, and he became their live-in son-in-law. He even had some skills and healed the scars on Thea's body, making Thea the #1 beauty in Kensington. Yes, I'm the James who married into the Callahans, James replied with a smile. Following that, he proceeded to pick up Zara's suitcase. Brat, where did you come from? Don't you see that this is my woman? Get lost, or else I'll kill you. Nelson glared and threatened James. What? James looked at Nelson, then at Zara. Do you know him? Zara shook her head. Nope. Let's go, then. James picked up Zara's suitcase. Nelson stepped forward and blocked James. Did you not hear what I said? Get lost. James' face darkened. He clenched his fists and threw a punch at Nelson's face. Nelson immediately felt overwhelmed by dizziness. He stumbled backward and fell to the ground, groaning in pain. Ads by Pub Future. Francis was dumbfounded. What just happened? This person was a subordinate of Mad Dog from the East District. How could he just hit him? After Nelson got beaten, Francis approached again and said with a smile, Zara, I've booked the table in the Gaumont. Let's go. It'll be your welcoming meal. Since Nelson was beaten up, he wanted to take her with him quickly. James glanced at Zara again. Do you know him? Zara shook her head. Nope. Wham. James swung his fist again. Francis stumbled and fell to the ground. Afterward, James finally showed a friendly smile and glanced at Zara. Let's go. What about? Zara glanced at the two people lying on the ground, unable to get up. She had heard about James. He was a retired soldier from the military. However, he never fought back. When mistreated by the Callahans and did all the house chores while enduring the scoldings. Is this really the rumored live-in son-in-law of the Callahans? He's clearly a hero who stands up to help others without hesitation. You're dead, brat. Francis got up from the ground and rubbed his dizzy head. He roared, Do you know who I am? I'm a Leland. My father is Ethan Leland, the owner of Leland Pharmaceuticals. You're so dead. Nelson got up, shook his head, and pointed at James. You're so going to die. My boss is Mad Dog from the East District. Just you wait, little brat. After his threats, he took out his phone. Boss, I'm at the airport. Someone took my target and hit me. Nelson made a phone call. Francis was terrified. He would be involved and get beaten up if Mad Dog really showed up with his men. The Lelands might also be dragged into the mess. He was so frightened that his legs went rubbery. Immediately, he turned around, got into his car, and drove off to a safe distance to watch without bothering to take Zara with him. Zara was also a little worried. Although she was not from Kensington, she knew that the Lelands were considered a wealthy family in the city. Despite that, Francis was afraid to offend the man. This proved that the person in front of them was not someone easy to mess with. She pulled James and whispered, Quick, let's make a run for it. However, James seemed unbothered. He glanced at Nelson, who was on the phone. Nelson had quite a handsome face. Unfortunately, it was because of his good looks that he could deceive some vain women. You better get more people. It might not be enough for me to beat up if you don't get more. He smiled condescendingly. Ads by Pub Future. Nelson's handsome face filled with anger. Brat, you're dead regardless of your background. James, let's just go. Zara grabbed James. It'll be alright. Since you already know I'm the live-in son-in-law of the Callahans, you should also know that I'm a retired soldier. I can easily handle 3 to 5 people. James smiled at her. Zara was relieved upon hearing his reply. Since James did not leave, she also decided to stay and see his fighting skills. Soon, several limousines pulled up. A few vicious-looking men swarmed out of the car with iron rods in their hands. Francis, who was a few dozen meters away, trembled when he saw the scene. It's over. The live-in son-in-law of the Callahans is also over. My dear Zara, why didn't you leave? Everything would be fine if you just left earlier. What should I do now? I don't have the guts to save you. Seeing his comrades arrive, Nelson's confidence immediately grew, and he glared at James. You're so dead, brat. Who is it, Nelson? A fierce-looking man in his 30s with a scar on his bald head walked over. He wore a black singlet with a thick gold necklace. Ads by Pub Future. The scar on his head alone was enough to frighten ordinary people. This person was Mad Dog's #1 subordinate, Samuel Hoffman. He had 38 consecutive wins in the underground arena and had killed countless people. Nelson walked over and bowed. Samuel, you could have just sent a few men for such a trivial matter. You didn't have to come in person. He pointed at James and Zara standing by the roadside. It's that brat. That woman is my target. She's a really good one. I planned to bring her to our boss, but this kid interrupted me. Samuel's eyes immediately lit up when he saw Zara. He scanned her from head to toe. Zara had her hair tied into a ponytail and wore a casual white t-shirt paired with a denim skirt, revealing her slender legs. Superb. Samuel had been with plenty of beautiful women but had never seen one so gorgeous. He swallowed his saliva and ordered, Everyone, go, break that man's legs and grab the woman. However, a jeep drove toward them unexpectedly and honked loudly. Everyone, hands on your head. You're not allowed to move. Following the sound of the car horn, several fully armed soldiers got out of the car. These were men under the Blythe King. After meeting up with James, the Blythe King was worried that James would impulsively cause trouble. He was unwilling to keep cleaning up the messes James caused, so he sent a small team to follow James. They were ordered to take immediate action if James showed signs of trying to beat people up. Thus, the team that secretly followed James immediately sprung into action after seeing such a scene. Samuel and the other gangsters were terrified when they saw fully armed military soldiers. In an instant, they all had their hands on their heads and squatted down on the ground, not daring to move a single muscle. Daniel walked in and smiled at James. Then, he gave the order. Seize them. The ferocious-looking thugs were seized in an instant. Upon seeing Daniel, Zara's heart raced. That was one-star General Daniel Highsmith under the command of the Blythe King. However, Before she could even react, Daniel had left. She watched him leave, her disappointment apparent on her face. That was the closest she had ever been to her hero. How could she have missed the opportunity to take a picture with him? James Long knew that the Blight King had been covertly sending someone to tail him. Perhaps this was a blessing in disguise, lest he attracted unwanted attention. He pulled Zara's suitcase along and smiled. "Let's go." Zara nodded in response. "Okay." Seeing that the thugs had been seized, Francis, who had been watching in the distance, drove toward them immediately. Ads by Pub Future. He got out of the vehicle and approached Zara. He hurriedly explained, "Don't be afraid, Zara. I'll protect you. My family is well acquainted with a general. I called them and requested help as soon as I sensed something was up. Are you all right?" "Oh." Zara glanced over at Francis and asked, "So, you were the one who called for help?" "Indeed. Look around you. This is Kensington, where the Leland family is of high status. My grandfather even attended the Blight King's succession ceremony a few days ago. The Leland family is regarded as a powerful and influential family in Kensington, so it's not strange for us to be acquainted with a general or two," Francis boasted with a smug look on his face. Francis was merely bragging. In truth, the Leland family was a second-rate family and could not even measure up to the Callahans. Zara had thought that Francis was a coward, yet it turned out that he had gone looking for help. He seemed to be a decent man, not to mention quick-witted. It's no wonder her mother held him in such high regard. "Zara, get in. We're going to the Gaumont. I've reserved a table for us," Francis said with a smile. Taking the suitcase from James' hands, he glared at him and yelled, "What are you looking at? Leave her to me." James was speechless. People nowadays were opportunistic and quick to take credit for someone else's work. He looked at Zara and asked, "Are you coming with me, or are you going with him?" Zara glimpsed at Francis. He was handsome, rich, and even well acquainted with the general. Besides, she heard that the Gaumont was the most luxurious hotel in Kensington. An ordinary man wouldn't even be able to make reservations. Ads by Pub Future. She wanted to visit the Gaumont. And most importantly, she wanted to get a picture with the general. Besides, her opinion of Francis had changed. She wanted to get to know him better. She looked at James apologetically. "Sorry for the trouble, James. You should head back first. I'll have Francis drop me off at Thea's place after lunch." Since she had made her decision, James said nothing. He turned and left, getting into David's dirt cheap Honda. It only cost $200,000. On the other hand, Francis invited Zara into his $1 million Audi and drove off. James took his phone out and called Thea. "Thea, I met your cousin, but her classmate picked her up." "Yeah, a guy named Francis." "What?" "He has a bad reputation in Kensington. He impregnated a university student, and she jumped off a building." Thea reprimanded him. "James, follow them. I won't forgive you if anything happens to my cousin." James had no choice. He started the car and followed them. If it was not for Thea's request, he would not have bothered doing so. After all, what did Zara have to do with him? However, now that Thea had mentioned Francis' bad reputation, Zara would likely be taken advantage of if she had lunch with him alone. Thea was concerned as she had experienced it before. She repeatedly reminded James to escort Zara home safely and that if anything happened to her, she would never forgive him. In the Audi, Zara was in the passenger seat. Francis drove all while boasting non-stop about his family's prestige in Kensington and how much money he was currently earning through his own company. "Zara, I heard from Thea that you came to Kensington to look for a job. Why not come and work for me in my herb processing plant? With my family's connections, I can rake in millions a year. I can even make you the manager. We'll see." Zara was disinterested. Francis could make a good boyfriend. Since they were classmates, she was also familiar with his personality. However, she had no feelings for him whatsoever. She liked heroes. She admired those who were strong. She came to Kensington in search of a living precisely because the Blight King was transferred here. She worshipped heroes and had an affinity for generals with great military prowess, like the Blight King. However, she was capable of distinguishing between dreams and reality. It was her dream to marry a general. However, in reality, she would be content with someone who could provide her with a decent life. After all, she had only gotten into Francis' car after hearing that the Leland family was acquainted with the general. Ads by Pub Future. Francis. Yes, what is it? Her words were stuck in her throat. Zara, we're on good terms, aren't we? Just speak your mind. As long as it's within my ability, I'd do anything for you. Is there a dress you'd like? Or is there a handbag you can't afford? Regardless, it's all a piece of cake to me. Zara was repulsed by Francis' non-stop blabber about money, but she kept her composure. You said you knew a general. May I know which general specifically? Huh. Her words caught Francis off guard. However, he was quick to recollect himself. Surely you know of the Blight King. I'm acquainted with Daniel, a one-star general under him, he bragged. Upon hearing this, Zara's heart skipped a beat. Francis was acquainted with Daniel, an incredibly famous man in the western borders. See, could you introduce me to him? I'd like to get a picture with him. Francis said with an uneasy look. Zara, surely you know who General Highsmith is. Sure, I can reach him on your behalf, but just who do you think you are? Do you think he'd agree to meet a nobody like you? Zara nodded. He was right. It seemed she would never realize her dream. She did not think much of it. She was just a little disappointed. Ads by Pub Future. Soon, they arrived at the Gaumont. The table Francis had reserved was located in the public hall. It was currently lunchtime in Kensington, the land of the wealthy. Hence, all the private rooms had been booked out. Either way, Francis would only be able to afford the lowest-priced bronze room. He had everything planned out. Knowing that Zara could not hold her liquor and would get drunk after just a sip, he planned to order a few bottles of wine while they dined. Now, he just had to think of a way to make her drink. Only then would his plan come to fruition. Dumb BTCH. Acting all upright and righteous. We'll see about that after I get you in bed. He chuckled coldly in his mind. However, outwardly, he wore a smile as he warmly gestured for Zara to enter the Gaumont. James, who was in close pursuit, entered behind Zara. He did not interrupt them. Unless things went south, he would not make an appearance. He planned to pick Zara up only after they were done with lunch. That, to him, would qualify as a mission accomplished. Outside the Gaumont, in the open parking lot, James parked his car. Upon getting off, he glanced at a jeep that had been tailing him. It was not too far away. He walked toward it and gently knocked on the window. The window rolled down. Daniel looked at James, embarrassed. General Highsmith, is everything all right at the military region? What's with your following me around all day? Are you treating me as a suspect? Daniel hurriedly explained, Black. James, the Blight King was worried you might get into trouble, so he sent me to protect you in secret. Protect me? James laughed. General Highsmith, do you hear yourself? Do I look like someone who needs to be protected? Tell the Blight King to stop tailing me. I've been denied my freedom, and I feel uncomfortable. But James, since you're here, let's have a meal together. Now that they were at the hotel, James was feeling a little hungry. Eating alone was boring. Thankfully, Daniel was here. More importantly, James did not have money and needed someone to pay the bill. No, I wouldn't dare. Daniel instantly froze in his tracks. How would he dare have lunch with James? James scowled at him. I'm giving you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to treat me to a meal. You should be honored. No one else would ever have the chance to do so. Fine, then. Daniel nodded and quickly got off the jeep. He was not in military uniform but his casual clothes. James wrapped his arm around Daniel's shoulder and walked toward the Gaumont. By the way, General Highsmith, I have a question. Daniel was feeling uncomfortable, having his shoulder grasped by James. Ask away, James. What do you think the higher-ups are up to, reorganizing the 5 military regions and even transferring the Blight King to Kensington as the commander-in-chief of the 5 armies? Daniel shivered. He hurriedly replied, I wouldn't dare presume the intentions of the higher-ups. James meant it as a casual question. He was not expecting Daniel to be so terrified. They entered the Gaumont. Since it was lunchtime, the public hall was fully booked. However, there were empty tables that were specifically reserved for emergencies. Upon entering the Gaumont, they were met with Brian. Someone had informed him of General Highsmith's arrival. Ads by Pub Future. As Brian approached them, he noticed James by Daniel's side and instantly felt a cold shiver down his spine. He walked up to them hurriedly. James, Daniel. James gestured as he spoke, keep things low. Just arrange a table for me in the public hall. James scanned his surroundings and spotted Zara. He pointed to the table right behind her and said, over there. Yes, Brian nodded. James waved Brian off. All right, now, having the owner of this place personally welcome us would only attract unwanted attention. I'm just the son-in-law of the Callahan family. It'd be bad if rumors started to spread. Understanding the situation, Brian took his leave. However, he arranged for someone else to receive James and Daniel. James was seated right behind Zara. She had her back to him, so she did not see him. On the other hand, Francis, who was seated opposite Zara, could only see James' back. As such, he did not recognize him. However, he did catch a glimpse of Daniel. Holy **T. The sight of Daniel shocked him, and he almost collapsed onto the floor. Francis' folks pass made Zara frown. It's nothing. Francis wiped the sweat off his forehead. A general came here to have lunch on the low. Everything should be fine as long as he was left alone. Zara, congratulations on making your way here to Kensington. Cheers. Zara frowned. Francis, you know I don't drink. Ads by Pub Future. Francis immediately added, Zara, it's just red wine. You won't get drunk. Come on, have a glass. For my sake. Upon hearing this, she picked the wine glass up and took a sip. She swallowed, and her throat felt like it was on fire. After all, she was a lightweight who would turn red upon ingesting the slightest bit of alcohol. At that moment, she felt like vomiting. I'm going to the washroom. She stood up and left. As she turned around, she noticed someone. She froze. General Highsmith. She had watched the live stream of the Blythe King's succession ceremony a few days ago. She had even rewatched it a couple more times after the ceremony. Was the man before her not Daniel? Zara felt her heart race. She had always looked up to heroes and had an affinity for army men. Seeing Daniel dressed in casual clothes, she was reminded of the commanding General Highsmith she had seen on TV a few days ago. He was dressed in military attire with a heart on his shoulder. She wanted to take a picture with him to commemorate the occasion. However, she could not pluck up the courage. She had missed her opportunity before. She could not make the same mistake now. She encouraged herself. As James had his back to her, she could not see him. After taking deep breaths, she summoned the courage to walk toward Daniel. Just as she was about to speak, she noticed James. She was stunned, her mouth agape. James. What was Zara seeing? Why was James, the son-in-law of the Callahan family, rumored to be an infamous loser, having lunch with General Highsmith, a general under the command of the Blythe King? She did not know how to react. Utterly shocked, she covered her mouth with her hands. Hearing a gasp, James turned around and noticed her. What is she doing? Is she that surprised to see me? However, one glance at Daniel, and he understood everything. He then stood up. What a coincidence, Zara, you're here too. Have you eaten? Come, join us. Oh, by the way, let me introduce you to Daniel. He's a good friend of mine. We grew up together in the orphanage. It's our first time seeing each other in years, so we decided to have lunch together. Daniel cast a glance at James, taken aback. He immediately understood the situation and played along. Standing up, he greeted Zara with a smile. Hello, I'm Daniel. Zara gasped. She was thrilled. General Highsmith is talking to me. What should I do? I'm so nervous. At the table right next to them, Francis was stunned upon seeing Zara extending her greetings to Daniel. Ads by Pub Future. He had just been bragging about being acquainted with General Highsmith. What should he do now that Zara has met the real deal? If he backed down now, he would lose this opportunity forever. Knowing this, he swallowed his pride and walked toward them. He presented himself before Daniel with a dignified expression. General Highsmith, how do you do? My name's Francis. I'm from the Leland family. Daniel frowned. Who are you? Buzz off. Francis was scared out of his wits. He pulled Zara aside. Zara, what are you doing? Let's go. We shouldn't anger the general. He dragged the astonished Zara away and whispered in her ear. I'll find the right time and place to introduce you to General Highsmith. James. Zara regained her senses and called out. James was seated, and Francis had only noticed Daniel. Upon hearing Zara's words, he paused and asked, who? Zara shook off Francis' grip. She picked up a backless stool and set it beside James. Sitting down, she said with a huge smile, James, I hope you won't mind. Yeah, sure thing, James replied with a listless look. When Francis saw James, he was shocked. What's this? Isn't that the son-in-law of the Callahan family? How is he having lunch with General Highsmith? Unable to process the situation, Francis was at a loss. Meanwhile, Zara, who was seated beside James, fixed her gaze on Daniel, eyes full of admiration. Ads by Pub Future. Daniel felt a little embarrassed, being stared at by such a beautiful young maiden. It would not have mattered if it was any other girl. However, she was the sister-in-law of the Black Dragon. What are you staring me for? Daniel felt his face and muttered, Is there something on my face? Gazing at Daniel, Zara felt her heart race and her adrenaline pumping. She did not expect to meet her idol, General Highsmith, so quickly after arriving in Kensington. She had long dreamt of taking a picture with him. Don't just sit there, dig in. James grabbed the cutlery and began eating. Meanwhile, Francis stood at the side, dumbfounded. Seeing that Zara had seated herself, he took a deep breath and approached their table again. He took a seat beside Zara. With a smile, he said, Zara, so you knew each other. James glanced at Francis and frowned. Zara, who's this? Zara, whose eyes were only on Daniel, shook her head. No idea. Slam. Daniel slammed the table. It sent shivers down Zara's spine. She immediately stood up. Francis was so frightened that he fell from his chair. Daniel then said coldly, Do not make me repeat myself. Scram. Francis dared not linger and immediately left. Zara, too, was preparing to leave. However, James pulled her back to her seat and said with a smile, Not you. Sit down and enjoy the food. Huh. Zara glanced at James and seated herself. Are you General Highsmith? Zara's eyes gleamed. Daniel looked at James. James laughed. Zara, his name's Danny. He's not a general. He's right. Daniel quickly nodded in agreement. Miss Zara, was it? I'm not a general. My name's Daniel. Sorry, Danny. I just look similar to Daniel. He stumbled over his words. Hearing this, Zara let loose a hearty laugh. She did not expect the majestic-looking general on TV to have such a cute side to him. She knew that the person before her was indeed General Highsmith. She had watched the Blythe King's succession ceremony countless times. There was no way that she could mistake him for someone else. No way. He had to be Daniel. Danny, seriously. General Highsmith, I really look up to you. See, can I get a picture with you? Zara blushed as she summoned the courage to ask him for a favor. Daniel glanced at James. James said with a smile, Feel free. It doesn't cost you a lot. Daniel nodded in agreement. Then, let's take a photo. Ads by Pub Future. Zara was delighted. She headed toward Daniel and sat next to him, though she was careful not to get too close. She quickly took her phone out and took a selfie. However, one was not enough. She got closer, so close their bodies were almost touching. She held up a peace sign and snapped another picture. Snap, snap, snap. She alternated between different poses as she snapped over a dozen more photos. Meanwhile, James was only concerned with eating. He was famished after skipping breakfast. After having taken so many photos, Zara was satisfied. With red cheeks, she said, General Highsmith, thank you so much. You're my idol, so I'm really excited to see you. I hope you don't mind all the photos. Haha, it's alright. Daniel laughed awkwardly. Danny, are you not eating? If you aren't, then leave. Oh, okay. Daniel, as if granted amnesty, quickly stood up and left. Hey, Zara called out. However, Daniel had already left. James, what are you doing? That was General Highsmith. He's my idol. How could you make him leave? As she spoke, her expression changed. Ads by Pub Future. Wait, you can order General Daniel Highsmith around. James replied, Daniel, I've told you, he's Danny. Also, why do you keep calling him a general? Zara seated herself and glanced at James. Her useless brother-in-law was enshrouded in secrecy. She remembered Daniel had given James a scarcely perceptible smile back then at the airport. James, are you one of the 5 commanders? Zara explained. Few knew much about the 5 commanders, let alone their existence. However, she knew bits and pieces about them, as she was a military fan. Daniel was the Blight King's subordinate. Even though James was not the Blight King, he had authority over Daniel. Therefore, he had to be one of the 5 commanders. James was at a loss for words. This girl had a keen eye. She had figured out his identity as one of the 5 commanders just from the meeting with Daniel. Yes, James said, smiling. That's right, I'm one of the 5 commanders. Francis, who had been concealing himself, walked toward them upon noticing that Daniel had left. He sat at Daniel's seat and shot James a look of displeasure. PFFT, if you're one of the 5 commanders, then I'm the emperor of the capital. Zara immediately lost interest in the conversation. She had long heard of James' past. He had retired from the army, but how was he one of the 5 commanders? Also, why would one of the 5 commanders marry into the Callahans? Zara could not understand this. How did James get to know General Highsmith? Danny, an old friend from the orphanage. James, be honest with me. What's your relationship with General Daniel Highsmith? Zara asked. James replied while munching on his food, General Daniel Highsmith. I don't know who that is. That guy earlier is a childhood friend of mine. We haven't seen each other in years. Since we bumped into each other, we decided to have a meal together. Is he a general now? You don't know. Zara was rather suspicious of James' words. General Highsmith seemed to obey James' every command and acted according to his wishes. James went on, I don't know. It's been more than 10 years since I was at the Southern Plains. This Danny, from what I know, this Danny guy went to the western border. He never mentioned anything about being a general. James put his chopsticks down and looked at Zara. He's a general. Yes. Did you not watch the Blight King's succession ceremony? It's been on replay these past few days. FCK, James explained. Really, this kid's a general now. Back in the day, he was just a nobody who looked up to me. This won't do. I have to bring him back here and kiss his *SS. Oh, wait, I don't have a phone. What should I do? I've lost this once in a lifetime opportunity to get rich. James put on a face of regret. Ads by Pub Future. Francis finally understood what was going on. He now knew why James was having a meal with General Highsmith. It turned out Daniel used to be called Danny, and he seemed to have been acquainted with James since young. However, that was many years ago. Now, Daniel was a general, and he was having a meal with James as a token of their childhood. Now that he was a general, it was likely he no longer thought much of James. Francis raised his head and said, Zara, the Leland family is also very influential. We're acquainted with General Highsmith. We've even requested his help in our business. He started bragging again. Eager to impress his crush, he boasted about his family's influence and his earnings from his plant. Hearing this, Zara began to feel a little repulsed. However, being rich was indeed something worth boasting about. Compared to his peers, Francis was a capable man. At least, he was much more competent than Zara's brother-in-law. She glanced at James. Marrying into the Callahans, unemployed, and using the resources of the Callahans as he pleased, he was a useless piece of trash. However, her opinion of him had changed after finding out he used to be in the military and that he knew Daniel. Ads by Pub Future. I'm full. James wiped his mouth with a napkin. Suddenly, he remembered. Who would pay the bill now that Daniel had left? Glancing at the still boasting Francis, he laughed. Since you're such a wealthy man, Mr. Leland, I hope you wouldn't mind paying the bill. As he spoke, he pulled Zara away. Zara, Thea ordered me to bring you home safely. Now that we've had our meal, let's leave. Okay, Zara nodded. James, what are you doing? Francis rebuked him all of a sudden. He had waited for Zara to come to Kensington and had finally gotten the opportunity to have a meal with her. He would not let her go so easily. He had planned to bring her shopping in his mall to impress her by flaunting his wealth. James frowned and asked, what? Francis pointed at James' hand and exclaimed, hands off. She's my girl. James glanced at Zara. Zara looked at Frances with a tint of displeasure. Frances, when did I ever say I was your girl? Frances' tone immediately softened. Zara, look at what I've got. Are you still hesitating? Once you become my girlfriend, you won't have to work anymore. You won't have to worry about food and clothing, and you can buy anything you want. Don't you want that? No, Zara replied curtly. I have a perfectly functioning body of my own. I can feed myself. After saying that, she turned and left. James was close behind her. Before leaving, he added, remember to pay the bill. Damn it. Francis clenched his fists angrily. A hint of disappointment flashed across his somewhat handsome face. James, you piece of junk. Just wait. James had ruined his plans, so he was full of hatred for him. James led Zara out of the Gaumont. He put her suitcase in the trunk and drove to the Clahans' residence. Zara sat in the passenger seat. She wore a silly smile as she scrolled through the photos she had taken with Daniel on her phone. James could not help but comment, they're just photos. Is that necessary? What do you know? Zara shot him a look. General Highsmith is my idol. The Blythe King's an even greater idol of mine. It was my lifelong dream to take a photo with them. Finally, my wish has come true. However, she stopped for a moment and glanced over at James, who was driving, before saying, the person I admire the most is the Black Dragon General of the Southern Plains. You said you were deployed to the south. So, have you seen the Black Dragon General? What does he look like? Ads by Pub Future. Of course. James had a haughty look on his face. No one knows the Black Dragon better than me. Really. Zara was delighted. So, is the Black Dragon tall or short? Is he fat or skinny? What's he like? Is he married? She popped a consecutive string of questions. She knew of the Black Dragon, and she knew of the battle that gave him that title. It was known all across the world. All military junkies knew of it. However, no one knew how the Black Dragon looked. The appointment of the Black Dragon as a general was top secret. Aside from a few higher-ups in the military regions, no one else knew about it. Even if some photos did leak, only a few of the most prominent families in the capital would have them. An ordinary family would never come close to ever seeing them. James said, smiling, I can confidently say that the Black Dragon is married. Give up on your dream. Zara was disappointed. However, that disappointment dissipated almost immediately. Brag all you want. I've heard that although you were in the military for 10 years, you remained the lowest ranked foot soldier. The Southern Plains was filled with millions of the Black Dragon army. I don't think you were even qualified to join their ranks. So, how could you possibly know the Black Dragon when you've never even seen him? James smiled and said nothing. Even if he had told her the truth, she would not have believed him. Instead, she would have chastised him for being delusional. Ads by Pub Future. Zara sighed deeply. A year ago, my idol, the Black Dragon, charged into the enemy camp alone and went on a rampage. Among all the bloodshed and the mountain of corpses, he returned triumphant with the enemy's commander's decapitated head. That marked a full stop to his legendary life. To think that a common citizen like you would be so knowledgeable, James said. Of course. Zara wore a smug look. I'm a veteran military junkie. However, her expression transitioned into one of sadness. I don't know if I'll ever be able to see the Black Dragon in my lifetime. When the opportunity presents itself, I'll visit the Southern Plains. For now, I'll remain in Kensington. Perhaps I'll get to see the Blythe King. Oh, right. Suddenly, she had an idea. James, you've known Daniel all your life. Although he's gotten ahead in life and is now in his prime, he may still do you a favor. Will you help me, please? I really want to take a picture with the Blythe King, she pleaded. Huh. James glanced over at Zara. He did have a liking for her. After all, she looked up to military men. She was not boy crazy and did not blindly worship celebrities. Besides, she merely wanted to take a picture with the Blythe King. It was not as if she was trying to marry a general. Zara, I can help you, but only if you keep this a secret from Thea. If you can do that, I'll bring you to meet the Blythe King. Zara was merely throwing words out. She was not hoping to get anything out of it. Even if General Highsmith had known James since he was a child, he was still a general and a person of high status. Moreover, to the Blight King, he was just a subordinate. He might agree to help James, but the Blight King himself might not be convinced. Upon hearing James' words, her eyes gleamed. Really? James said with a smile, of course. I used to be in the military too. Since you're so enthusiastic, I'll come up with something. James, that's great. Thank you. Zara was excited. The Blight King was one of the 5 commanders. Although the Blight King was not the most admired of all, she would be more than content if she got to take a picture with him. James glimpsed at the rear view mirror. The jeep was still tailing him. He knew that the Blight King was still tailing him. Zara eventually recollected herself and asked with an upset look on her face, James, don't give me false hope. You may be childhood friends with General Highsmith, but there's no way he'd be able to convince his superior to take a picture with me. James smiled. We'll give it a try. Ads by Pub Future. He turned the car around and headed in the direction of the military region. Soon, they arrived at the gates of the Kensington military region. James, you are doing this right now. With a confused look, she asked, would we get to see the Blight King without informing General Highsmith? We'll try our luck. James grinned with an air of mystery. He parked his car by the side. He knew that the Blight King had been informed of his arrival. After all, he had been sending his men to monitor his movements. As expected, a few minutes later, a middle-aged man clad in combat gear walked out. He had 5 stars plastered on his shoulder. He had a round face and bushy eyebrows. He exuded an aura of unrivaled dominance. Zara watched as the Blight King walked toward them. She was so filled with exhilaration that she had almost forgotten to breathe. James opened the car door and gestured for her to get off. The Blight King approached them and shot James a look with a slight frown. Zara got off the car and nervously stood before the Blight King. Yes, this was the Blight King. He was more majestic in person than on TV. She held her breath. James said calmly, this is my cousin. She's a veteran military fan. She looks up to you and wants to take a picture with you. What do you think? The Blight King frowned. What was the Black Dragon up to? He glanced at Zara. Ads by Pub Future. Zara's heart stopped. Her mind went blank. The moment she laid her eyes on the Blight King, her senses went numb, and she could do nothing but stand in place. She could not hear anything James was saying. James lightly pushed the stupefied. Zara, what are you standing here for? Go and take the picture. Huh. Zara recollected her senses and carefully glanced at the Blight King. May I? Wearing a look of compassion, the Blight King replied, but, of course. Why not? Upon hearing this, Zara got so excited she almost burst into tears. She swiftly took her phone out and handed it to James. James, help me out. She was so thrilled that she had almost dropped her phone. James took the phone and opened the camera. Zara then walked toward the Blight King and stood by his side. Closer, James instructed. Zara wanted to, but she dared not. Unexpectedly, the Blight King got closer to her. As long as the Black Dragon was pleased and did not cause any trouble, the Blight King would have his peace and quiet. What was a photography session worth, after all? Commander-in-Chief, loosen up. Smile. Also, try putting your arm around her shoulders. Give us a loving expression, won't you? Upon hearing this, the Blight King was enraged. However, he kept his composure and did as James had instructed. Zara felt a pair of strong arms wrap around her shoulders. At that moment, her breathing stopped. She could not feel her heartbeat. Done, James called out before she could even react.